Another way that you can solve quadratics is by factoring. So this is something we've already studied quite a bit. We're just going to do a couple problems to review here. So number one, I've got x squared plus 8x plus 15 is equal to 0. The first thing I notice is that this is already set equal to 0, which is what I want. So I don't have to rearrange anything. So I'm going to start off by just naming my a, b, and c. So if you remember, those are our coefficients, the numbers in front of our variables. In front of my x squared is a 1. In front of my x is an 8. In front of my, there's no variable there. 15 is just the constant. So 1, 8, and 15. So I do that because when I make my x box, it's AC, A times C, that goes in this up, this top corner here. So A times C, 1 times 15 is just 15. And then here I'm going to put my B. So that's my 8. So we want to look for numbers that can multiply to give you 15, that add to give you 8. Okay? So I'm going to do a little bit of work over here. My factors of 15, we know 1 times 15 is 15, but 1 plus 15 is 16. So that will definitely not work. 2 is not a factor of 15. Let's try 3. Yes, 3 times 5 is 15, and 3 plus 5 is 8. That's exactly what I need it to be. So there is our winner right there. So I'm going to take this 3 and 5 and put it in here, the rest of my X box, and this tells me what I'm going to use to factor. So at this point, I can actually draw my answer, okay? It is factors into x plus 3 and x plus 5. Now remember, this whole thing, if we just asked you to factor it, you would be fine. But since we're trying to solve it, we need to go ahead and make that equal 0. So at this point, I know that either this has to equal 0 or this has to equal 0. So I'm going to set up two separate problems. X plus 3 is equal to 0. How am I going to solve for x? I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. Those cancel. So x could be -3. That's one of our answers. For here, x plus 5 is equal to 0. Subtract that 5. And x is equal to -5. So these are my two answers for question number 1. Okay, question number 2, this becomes a little bit harder now because I'm looking at my leading coefficient, my a. It is not 1. So we've got a couple extra steps to add in here. So let's start off the same way. A is equal to 4. My b is equal to -21. And my c is equal to, this is not written right, is it? I need to bring this over to the other side. So to bring 18 over to the other side, I would have subtracted 18, which means I need to subtract 18 on this side. All right, so I need to rewrite this so it's in standard form. 4x squared minus 21x minus 18 is equal to 0. Okay, so now that's a little bit better. This is my A, this is my B, this is my C, -18. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and make my X box again. And remember, this is A times C. So here I've got A times C, 4 times -18. That's going to give me -72. And then down here is my B, which is a -21. All right, so these factors we may not know by heart. So let's do a little bit of scratch work over here. -72. I know that I can go 1 times -72 is -72, but 1 plus -72 is a -71. Definitely not my right answer. I'm looking for numbers that when I add them, they're going to add up to -21, remember. Let's try 2. 2 if I divide negative 72 by 2, I am going to get 36. So 2 times a negative 36 does give me a negative 72, but 2 plus a negative 36 gives me a negative 34. Not good enough, so that does not work. 3, does 3 go into 72? Sure does. So if I do negative 72 divided by 3, I should get a negative 24. All right, we know that that will multiply to give us negative 72, but when I add them, 3 plus negative 24, that is going to give me negative 21. Yes, that helps. That's what I'm going to plug in here. So I've got 3 and I've got negative 24. Okay, so at this point, I know how I'm going to rewrite my middle term. Let me get rid of some of this junk down here. Okay. All right, so this is the part where this is different from when a equals 1. I'm going to go back to my original problem here, and I'm going to rewrite this middle term. So my first term stays the same, 4x squared. And instead of minus 21x, I'm going to use these numbers. All right, I'm going to say minus 24x plus 3x. All right, so I'm rewriting that middle term, minus 21x. And I still have this minus 18 over here. Okay, I did that because now I'm looking at grouping them. If I group them, I'm going to group those two together and these two together. I do that because I'm going to look at what I can pull out here. So here I'm pulling out my GCF. So what can I pull out that is common between 4x squared and 24x? I think I can pull out a 4x. They both have a 4x in both of those factors. So if I pull out a 4x here, that's going to leave me with just 1x. It's getting kind of tight. If I divide this by a 4x, that's going to leave me with a 6. Okay, now let's see what we can pull out of here. Between 3 and 18, well, there's not very many factors of 3, just 1 and 3. 18, I can divide 18 by 3, so that's perfect. I divide both those by 3. That leaves me with, pull out the 3. That leaves me with plain old x inside. 18 divided by 3 is a 6. And that is equal to 0. All right, I like how this is looking because I see an x minus 6 here and an x minus 6 here. It tells me I am doing this right. So now I'm going to create my two factors. That x minus 6 is one of my factors. My other factor is going to be what's left, 4x plus 3. All right, so all of that is equal to 0. So now I'm back to the point of saying each of these factors I can set equal to 0. 4x plus 3 is 0. Now, if I'm going to solve that, this becomes a two-step problem. Subtract 3 from both sides. That's 4x cancels out. It's equal to negative 3. I would have to divide by 4, divide by 4. So that leaves me with x is equal to negative 3/4. That's one of my answers. Okay. And then on the other side, I kind of ran over, x minus 6 would have to equal 0. Well, that's a one-step problem. I just have to add the 6 to both sides. And that's going to leave me with x is equal to 6. So I have two answers here. X is equal to negative 3/4 and x is equal to 6.